Welcome to the Sauk Valley Media sponsored debate between the candidates for Whiteside County State's Attorney. The candidates are Chris Joyce, Democrat, Pat Liston, Republican. Should be obvious who is whom. My name is Larry Law. I'm executive editor of Sauk Valley Media, and I'll be moderator tonight. We have flipped a coin, and Ms. Joyce has chosen to go first in all three phases of our debate tonight. The first question then, Gary Spencer has been the state's attorney for 3 decades, and as we know, he's chosen not to run for re-election this year. His office has developed ways of doing things during that time. Both of you have had the opportunity to work for Mr. Spencer as an assistant state's attorney. What practices that Mr. Spencer has employed would you continue, and which ones would you change? Ms. Joyce?
Thank you. I think overall Gary has done a very good job of representing the people of this county, but I think that there's room for improvement in every single office. I would say the same thing of the office that I've been running for several years. So one of the things that I would like to do is implement some programming. And I see the need for programming in terms of alternatives to warehousing people in jail. These types of programs would be for persons who are nonviolent offenders, who have committed either a first-time offense or a somewhat moderate offense, who don't have a lengthy prior criminal history. And the things that I would look at would be second chance types of programs. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. Some of these programs are already implemented in other counties. There's no reason that we can't collaborate with these other counties. In addition, I would like to see some specialty courts added. And the specialty courts that I would have in mind would be a drug court, a mental health court, and a special veterans issues court. I have attended a statewide seminar focusing on these particular types of courts. I have also met with people who are involved in these courts in other jurisdictions, have been able to pick their brains, talk about collaborative efforts, talk about funding. So those are some things that I would like to explore and implement. In addition, I think it's extremely important to try to close the gap between an arrest of a person who is facing a violent offense and the actual trial and or sentencing of that person. And I think that severe and swift punishment for people convicted of severe criminal offenses should take place rather than the rather cumbersome pretrial system that we have currently. Thank you.
Mr. Liston, same question to you.
Mr. Spencer has a background as a Whiteside County deputy sheriff before he became state's attorney. And I believe as a result of that, he has developed a very close working relationship with local law enforcement. My intention would be to continue to work closely and foster those relationships. That's one of the things that I have admired about his program or office while I worked there. Ms. Joyce raises the issues of alternative courts. That is something I would also like to explore. I have no difference with her on that. However, it's not like that's never been explored in Whiteside County before. For example, drug court is something that I've looked into. I've talked to our circuit judges about. It has been felt by the judges, by probation, that in order to be effective, you have to have an ability to take somebody off the street, put them into treatment right away. And one of the snags that they ran into when they fully investigated this about 4 years ago was an inability to get the medical support that was necessary. I would certainly like to look at that. I would be differing. I think, I too believe Mr. Spencer has done a good job as state's attorney. My philosophies might be a little different. I, again, agree with Ms. Joyce that I would like to see particularly young non-offenders who do something stupid like scrappers or things like that where they get themselves charged with serious crimes have the ability to avoid a felony conviction, which can screw them up long-term. The drug court and other options are things, of course, as I said, that I'd like to look into.
Follow up, Ms. Joyce?
Well, I think it's interesting that both Lee and Ogle counties, which are neighboring counties, have been able to implement drug courts, and they haven't faced the difficulty that Mr. Liston described. Certainly, if I am elected, I would explore immediately trying to implement these courts. In fact, as I said, I have talked to the authorities in other counties about how they have done so. I've attended a training on it, and I know the types of preliminary steps that need to be taken, the grants that could be available for such specialty courts, and also have discussed possibility of looking at establishing a 501c3 entity for the court to assist in funding it. So there are methods out there. There is a statutory mandate that requires each county to have a drug court, and I would like to get our county in compliance with that.
Any follow, Mr. Liston?
Again, I don't disagree with that. All I'm saying is that it will take an effort from the community, the medical community, local law enforcement, and the state's attorney's office in order to put together any effective program. I am certainly willing to work toward that end.
Second question will go first to Mr. Liston. What has been your involvement in the state's attorney's office in handling the cases against the murder defendant, Nicholas Shealy? How have you prepared yourself to step into that case if you were elected?
I have been peripherally involved. For example, I was on the scene when the gentleman, Mr. Reed, was found in Sterling, acting in an advisory capacity for the police in terms of search warrants that they might need at that time. I have not worked in great detail on the case since then. Mr. Spencer and the Attorney General's office has pretty much carried most of the load on that. I would approach it like I approach any other case. I would familiarize myself even more so with the facts than I am now, interview the witnesses, prepare them for their testimony, and try it like I try any other case.
Ms. Joyce, how have you prepared yourself to step into the Nicholas Shealy cases if you're elected?
Well, I think it's the same way that I would prepare for any other case. In regard to that particular case, I've been very fortunate that Mr. Spencer has chosen to share with me information in regard to that case and to keep me apprised of developments in that case, because he would like to see whoever wins have a seamless transition into his position. So that has been very helpful for me. In addition, I'm intending to attend some of the actual trial proceedings next week to familiarize myself with some of the issues presented and also some of the players. I have been an attorney for 27 years. I have been in court on an almost daily basis. I have tried every type of case you can practically think of and done every type of job that is available within the state's attorney's office other than serving as the state's attorney. I know how to evaluate cases and determine whether there's appropriate evidence to bring a case. I know how to work with police. I have an excellent rapport with them. I know how to prepare a case. I know how to try a case. I have tried cases before judges, before juries. I have handled cases on appeal. So I know what things to look for. I know how to handle a case, and I welcome anybody to ask fellow criminal law attorneys about my performance in court, the fact that I'm always prepared, and that I do an excellent job and often have repeat clients.
Any follow-up, Mr. Liston?
Only to state that I too have many years of legal experience. I've tried cases in front of juries on at least 20 occasions. I'm familiar with handling jury instructions. In the last 5 years, since I've been with the Whiteside County State's Attorney's Office, I've tried 10 felony cases, including a murder trial. So it wouldn't necessarily be new to me. Obviously, the magnitude of that case is somewhat greater, but again, I would prepare like I do for any of my other trials.
Any follow, Ms. Joyce?
I would just indicate that I too have handled a murder case within my career. It did end up, I was a defense attorney in that capacity. It did end up where I was able to plead my client to an attempt home invasion. And she did serve a sentence in the Department of Corrections. But the way that I prepared that case was to, again, evaluate the evidence, look at the possible penalties, interview witnesses, and do all the things that you would normally do even if you were to take that case to trial. In the end, there was sufficient evidence to convict her, at least of the offense that she ultimately pled to, and I thought it was an excellent disposition, and I might add, so did the sentencing judge.
Next question will first go to Ms. Joyce, who will be asked by Jeff Rogers, Managing Editor of Sauk Valley Media.
State's Attorney Spencer has refused to answer publicly any questions about his history of prosecuting Nick Shealy in the years before the murder cases, saying his comments could violate court rules against prosecutors making statements that might jeopardize a defendant's right to a fair trial. Later, he showed up at a public meeting of a committee of a county board to support a resolution to maintain the death penalty in Illinois, and he called Shealy, quote, a poster child for the death penalty, end quote. How would you have handled those two instances?
It is not my place to second guess the decisions that Mr. Spencer has made. He's not my opponent. He is not here to defend himself. I'm not going to participate in that. What I would tell you is that I believe in transparency. I believe in informing the public of what's occurring in a case, so long as it does not jeopardize the actual prosecution of the case. I think that not only does the public benefit by knowing what's happening in a case, but so do people at large, so do the participants in the case. It just makes sense. That's why we have a rule about discovery, so that everybody's got an even playing field, and the defense has to exchange information with the prosecution, and the prosecution does with the defense. So that would be the model that I would follow if I'm elected state's attorney.
Mr. Liston?
Likewise, I'm not going to second guess what Mr. Spencer may have said or did in a specific incident. I can only tell you that my philosophy is one of openness and transparency in all forms of government. Over the past 5 years, I've worked closely with Joel Horn, the county administrator, who is the Freedom of Information officer for the county. And I think he would agree with me when I make the statement that our interpretation of that act and of the Public Meetings Act is that people have the right to know what's going on. The Attorney General's office has published opinions that emphasize, if in doubt, release the information. And I think that's the philosophy that I would take forward going into the state's attorney's office. Now, when you're talking about criminal prosecutions, that gets a little trickier. You do have to be extremely careful that you don't jeopardize the defendant's right to a fair trial by making comments in public.
Follow, Ms. Joyce?
I don't have any comment.
Mr. Liston?
Nothing further on that topic.
Go to the next question.
Next question.
State's Attorney Spencer has asked the county board to set aside $50,000 in next year's budget for a special prosecutor in the Shealy case, should the next state's attorney think one is needed. He's offered his services as special prosecutor. Do you think that a special prosecutor is needed in the Shealy case? And if so, do you think it should be Gary Spencer?
Is that to me or Mr. Liston?
Mr. Liston first.
I would not rule out Mr. Spencer if the need was there, because he's obviously familiar with the facts. However, generally speaking, you have 160 days to bring somebody to trial after they've had a trial and they have a number of cases pending. So you would have, in my opinion, sufficient time to prepare, and I think the people of Whiteside County would like their elected state's attorney to be the one to try the case. That would be my intention. If for some reason that wasn't possible, I would not rule out using Mr. Spencer as a special prosecutor.
Ms. Joyce?
I have been preparing for 27 years to try Mr. Shealy or any other felon or any other person charged with an offense who would come before me if I'm elected. I agree with Mr. Liston that it would be foolish to out of hand rule out any assistance from Mr. Spencer. However, I agree with his assessment as to how long a person would have to be able to become prepared. I also know that the Assistant Attorney General, who has been handling the second group of murders on behalf of the Attorney General's office, is Steve Plazabat. Steve is an excellent prosecutor. In fact, I worked with him for several years in Mr. Spencer's office. I believe that between the two of us, we could easily be able to assimilate the facts and present a very strong prosecution. However, ego should not play a part in these prosecutions. They are too important. If I felt that I needed any assistance from any party, whether it be Mr. Spencer or anybody else, I would feel that it's in the best interest of the public for me to take that assistance.
Any follow-up, Mr. Liston?
No, sir.
Ms. Joyce, that complete your answer?
That completes it.
Next question will be asked by Jim Dunn, who is opinion page editor of Sauk Valley Media.
As you're both aware, the Supreme Court is experimenting with a pilot program that allows still cameras, microphones, and video cameras in the courtroom under certain circumstances. Now, asked his opinion of that program, Mr. Spencer seemed to express little enthusiasm. We have a quote from him: "The Supreme Court makes the rules. It's my job to play by them, whatever those rules are," close quote. Whiteside County recently conducted a murder trial at which cameras and other electronic devices were allowed. What is your assessment of how that process affected the trial, and how, if at all, has it affected your opinion on cameras and microphones in the courtroom?
Ms. Joyce, you first.
Well, I don't think that the ultimate verdict in that recent murder trial had anything to do with the absence or presence of cameras. The evidence spoke for itself. Again, I am not here to criticize Mr. Spencer or second guess any comment that he made regarding cameras in the courtroom. With my own personal opinion, I applaud the use of cameras in the courtroom. I think that it promotes transparency. I think it dispels a lot of myths. I mean, most people think that what they see on the People's Court or on Judge Judy, that's really a good facsimile of what occurs in court, and it's not. So I welcome the use of cameras. I think it's an important tool. I think the public has the right to know, and I would do whatever is necessary to support that.
Mr. Liston?
I believe I tried the first case where cameras were allowed in our circuit. The program was implemented by Judge O'Connor out of Rock Island, who is the chief judge of the circuit. And to be quite honest, after the jury selection started, I didn't know there were cameras in the courtroom. They were very unobtrusive. They remained in the back of the courtroom. I don't feel that it played any role whatsoever in the performance of the attorneys in that trial. Sure, there could be situations where you have somebody who really wants to ham it up, seek publicity, things like that, but overall, I'm all for it. As I said, my position, both on freedom of information, the Open Meetings Act, and the public's ability to see what's going on in the courts, I'm all for transparency.
Any follow-up, Ms. Joyce?
Well, I would just note that there are some theatrics that go on in court where there aren't cameras or there aren't reporters, and so you're going to have a certain amount of that. But I noticed even while we've been speaking with you here that there's been a photographer and a reporter, and as Pat indicated, they've been very unobtrusive here. They haven't disrupted these proceedings, and quite frankly, until you brought up the topic, I really wasn't paying any attention to them being here.
Mr. Liston, follow-up?
The only thing I would follow up with, and we didn't file, when I say we, the state's attorney's office, any objections to the use of cameras in the courtroom. However, several witnesses did. And the only negative I would point out is the possible chilling effect that it could have on witnesses, but the judges make the rulings on the objections, and they can accommodate certain things under the laws that currently exist. So again, overall, I'm all for it.
Next question first goes to Mr. Liston.
The vast majority of people in Whiteside County get their information about the judicial system in general and the state's attorney's office in particular from reading their local newspaper or going to the website and reading the stories online. Now, Mr. Spencer's practice has been to grant interviews with reporters by email only. What relationship should the state's attorney's office have with the media? First question. Secondly, how accessible do you intend to make yourself and your staff to questions and interview requests by news reporters?
Well, again, keeping in mind that you have to have a really sharp focus on not jeopardizing a defendant's right to a fair trial, my philosophy would be to be as open as possible. I think I have made myself accessible to reporters from Sauk Valley Media. I would hope to continue that. There wouldn't be any restrictions other than the ethical obligation not to make statements about pending cases that would jeopardize a defendant's right to a fair trial. Again, my philosophy is there should be transparency in all government, and giving access to the media is one way of doing that.
Ms. Joyce?
I too wouldn't have a problem with having open access to the media. In fact, I have reviewed the county website and specifically the state's attorney's office page, and I think that there are some additional matters such as convictions and things of that nature that could be posted on the website that may provide more information for the citizens. So I'd like to explore better utilizing the county website page. In addition, I have regularly been available to media when they have contacted me. I don't see any reason to do anything differently. In fact, when you contacted me to do this, I provided a cell phone number and email address, so I don't see any reason why I would do anything differently if elected to this position.
Follow up, Mr. Liston?
Nope, other than to say that I would continue the same way I've been doing it, again, keeping in mind that you have to not jeopardize the defendant's right to a fair trial.
Ms. Joyce?
And I would say that almost goes without saying, because you certainly don't want to muddy the waters when you're in the business of prosecuting crimes. You don't want to give anybody an avenue for an appeal. You want to cleanly try a case. And so that should always be foremost in your mind.
Next question will go to Ms. Joyce first. What is the role of the state's attorney in law enforcement in Whiteside County? What relationship should the state's attorney's office have with local police departments?
I'm glad you asked that question because I think back to the days when I was an assistant state's attorney, and we regularly did training programs with the police, and that was extremely helpful because you saw better reports, you saw better courtroom testifying if you routinely gave the police training. And I understand that there are numerous laws out there that they have to familiarize themselves with, and they by no means put themselves out there as attorneys, and they do need some help and guidance. So I would like to see more of that. I would also like to see more of a team approach to prosecution. When I was a prosecutor, I had no problem calling up an officer and saying, hey, I'm thinking about charging somebody with this based on your report, but I need a little bit more evidence. Could you find out some information about this particular topic or that, or re-interview this witness? And I had police officers actually say, thank you, I'm happy for your guidance, I'm happy to help you with that. So I would like to see more of a team approach in prosecutions in determining what charges to file and what evidence is appropriate. And when I was an assistant state's attorney, we used a team approach when we were doing search warrants. And it was really helpful because an officer who was conducting an investigation and who was desiring a search warrant would usually come with a generalized outline for information that they wanted to include in the search warrant. And then we collaborated together to try to refine that information and to try to draft an appropriate complaint for the warrant and search warrant that would hold up. And it was a good process, and I would hope to continue that. And I would also like to meet with police departments on at least a monthly basis to say to them, what are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? What can we do differently to assist you with your job?
Mr. Liston, the role of the state's attorney in law enforcement and the relationship with police departments.
As I mentioned before, Mr. Spencer had a background as a Whiteside County deputy sheriff, so one of the things as I mentioned before, that I've noticed is that I believe he has a very close relationship with most law enforcement agencies. We do send out letters, memos, instructing officers on arrest procedures. Search and seizure law is constantly shifting. The courts keep changing little things, and it's important for the state's attorney's office to keep the local police informed on whatever changes may be going on so that an arrest doesn't get thrown out. Personally, in addition to assisting with search warrants, arrest warrants, and giving advice to individual officers, at the beginning of this year there was a change in the seizure law regarding when contraband or vehicles can be seized when a defendant is arrested for specific crimes. After attending several telephone seminars on the subject, I personally developed forms, affidavits for the police officers to use, and of course got them out to them. I think the state's attorney has to work closely, and by that it's implied that you're working as a team because you're on the same side. You're, for the most part, seeking the same objectives, which is to make Whiteside County a safer place.
Follow up, Ms. Joyce?
Sending out memos and sending out directives is one of the first steps, but I think a face-to-face with officers, a chance to answer their questions, to instruct them in person, to take in input from them is far more beneficial than simply leaving it at sending out written materials to them. So although I think that's a helpful first step, I think it should be followed up with in-person contact.
Mr. Liston, follow up?
I didn't mean to imply that there wouldn't be personal follow-up. I meet with police officers on a daily basis, and we discuss issues related to the arrests, the search and seizure procedures that they use, and what the status of the law is.
Next question goes first to Mr. Liston. If elected, how would you divide your time between leading criminal prosecution efforts and administering the office of state's attorney? Would you be the primary courtroom prosecutor, or would an assistant handle that duty?
Obviously, the administrative time would be important, but again, I believe the state's attorney is the person that the people elect that they want to see prosecuting the major crimes in Whiteside County. Now, obviously, the state's attorney cannot do all of that. Currently, we have 4 felony prosecutors in the office. I would utilize them to the same extent that they're being utilized now. Significant cases, I would be the lead prosecutor in the courtroom, and to divide the amount of time to say 50% for administrative, 50% in the courtroom, I'm not sure I could actually do that at this point. Certainly both would require a lot of time and effort, but again, I think the people of Whiteside County would expect their elected state's attorney to be the lead prosecutor on any really significant criminal prosecution.
Ms. Joyce?
I think the buck stops with the state's attorney, and so if you're going to file a significant case and you believe in that case, you should be the person trying it, and that would be my philosophy. Now, that's not to say that I would ignore the other duties that the prosecutor has, and that would consist of trying to run a budget-conscious office and also dealing with the civil aspects of that job, whether it be providing advice to the county board or to department heads or what have you. So I could see myself splitting time between those duties. I could not give you an exact amount of time, but I certainly think that any major case, serious felony case, should be tried by the top prosecutor, and I believe that I have the experience and knowledge to do that.
Any follow, Mr. Liston?
No.
Ms. Joyce, does that complete your answer?
Yes.
Next question goes first to Ms. Joyce. In Illinois, the state's attorney is not only the local criminal prosecutor, but also the chief legal counsel to county government. But some Whiteside County board officials have complained that the state's attorney's office has been slow to respond to requests for opinions. Do you intend to be the lead attorney in attending county board meetings and providing legal advice to the board, or will you delegate that responsibility to an assistant?
I absolutely believe that the state's attorney should be the lead attorney in that particular role. Now, I cannot be several places at once, and I know that there are times when I would not be available to them. My plan would be to designate a second attorney with sufficient civil experience to also assist, so that not only with the county board, but also department heads and other members of the county who are acting in their official capacities could at all times have somebody that they could go to for advice.
Mr. Liston?
Over the course of the last 5 years, because I have fairly extensive civil legal experience, before I went to the state's attorney's office, I was designated as pretty much the lead civil counsel for department heads and the county board members, and in conjunction with Mr. Spencer for the past 5 years, I've been attending most county board meetings. I attended all the wind farm meetings. I would intend to continue that practice as much as possible. As Ms. Joyce points out, you can't be everywhere at the same time. And currently, there is no one in the office that has a very extensive civil background other than myself, which is why I believe Mr. Spencer had me designated as a person to work with the county and the county board on civil matters. I believe the state's attorney should stay acutely on top of the issues with the department heads, and even if I were to have somebody that I would either have to hire or train to be able to deal with the issues that often come up, you have to stay closely involved. Often you're dealing with issues that have no real clear answers. You're dealing with issues ranging from contracts, leases, workers' compensation issues, labor problems, and that's where I believe my appellate background would come into play, and I believe that with the amount of appellate work I've done, which has resulted in at least 7 published opinions by the appellate courts, shows an ability to research issues and try and be able to predict what the right answer is when it's not clean cut.
Follow up, Ms. Joyce?
Well, I would indicate that I too have appellate court experience. I've handled several appellate court cases, and in addition, I have handled numerous civil cases. When I was an assistant state's attorney under Mr. Spencer, I was one of the assistants who handled civil matters for the county. So I have experience in that regard. Over the last 15 years, I have been a private attorney practicing civil law. So if I were elected state's attorney, Mr. Liston would not have to worry about nobody being in the office who could do civil matters. I could do them.
Follow, Mr. Liston?
Well, the only thing I meant to imply was that right now there are no other assistants, so unless a person with the proper background was hired, trained, or supervised, currently the elected state's attorney would probably have to be the main person involved with the county board and the county heads.
Our final question will go first to Mr. Liston. Do you believe the Whiteside County State's Attorney's Office is underfunded or understaffed? And if so, where specifically is more funding needed?
In this day and age, I think every county department and even private companies, various departments and private companies would say they could use more funding. But the reality of the situation is that money is not available right now. Could the state's attorney's office use more money? Absolutely. I think any department would say that. However, again, having been attending county board member meetings for the last 5 years, I have to say that the Whiteside County Board has done an admirable job in making sure that funding has not reached levels so low that any particular department can't function the way they're supposed to. So I guess my answer is we can get by. I think the county board has done a fine job. Would more funding be appreciated? Absolutely. I just don't see it in the budget right now.
Ms. Joyce?
I think that the county board has done an excellent job in running this county because our financial status is much brighter than other neighboring counties. They've lived within their means and they've operated on a shoestring budget for a long time, but they have still provided quality services. I have reviewed the state's attorney's budget both last year and this year, and I think Mr. Spencer has done a really good job of ensuring that his office stays on track budget-wise, and he also operates using the bare minimum of funds available to run his office appropriately. I too agree that everybody would like to have more funding because there are always things that you could do to try to improve services or facilities or things of that nature. But I do believe that the monies that the county board has allocated in the past few years and currently have been sufficient to do a good job of running that office.
Any follow-up, Mr. Liston?
I would only add that one of the things that I would like to do as state's attorney would be to explore alternative sources of funding. Many programs can be funded through grants given by the state or even by the federal government. That's an area that I would certainly want to explore.
Ms. Joyce?
And in response to that, there are also self-sustaining programs that could be implemented where fees are charged to the user. And in that fashion, your program would not need funding. I agree that there are grants out there that could be accessed. Again, I would mention that there is the ability to collaborate with other counties to try to share some of the programming costs and also fill those programs. And as I said recently, I've explored the option of making some of these programs perhaps qualify for a 501c3 designation and maybe then allow them to sustain themselves on donations.
That ends our questions. Now the candidates will have the opportunity to ask one question without rebuttal to the opponent. Ms. Joyce, you get to ask first.
I subscribe to the theory that it's foolish to allow my opponent any more time, and so I have no question for him.
Ms. Joyce passes. Mr. Liston, do you have a question for your opponent?
I think, as people can tell from a lot of our answers, our philosophies really aren't that different. I don't see any need to ask any further questions.
No further questions then. Well, then we can finish with the 2-minute closing statements. Ms. Joyce, you're first.
Thank you. I would like to thank the editorial board and members of Sauk Valley newspapers for affording us this opportunity. I hope that voters are actually listening and learning about us and making up their minds after viewing us. I hope that people don't take a narrow-minded view of who to vote for based upon a party, based upon the way someone looks. I'm hoping that they'll actually look into our backgrounds and issues. I would invite people to ask police officers, former and present, court personnel, people who work with us on a regular basis, other attorneys who regularly practice criminal law, members of DCFS, members of any organization that routinely work with us, and ask them their opinions on who would be the most suitable candidate. I believe that After working here for 27 years as a trial attorney in court on an almost daily basis, having 13 years experience as an assistant state's attorney, having 15 years experience as a private attorney, having 2 years experience as an assistant public defender. In all of those capacities, I have done almost every job within the state's attorney's office. I have done almost every legal job that you can do. I believe that I have the requisite experience to go into this job on the very first day prepared to take over all of the duties that the prosecutor must have. I'm from this area. I have a vested interest in this area. I have been extremely active in my community. I hope to continue to give back in the capacity as state's attorney, and I hope to continue to be involved in the various types of community organizations and events that I have continued to be active in over the last 27 years. And lastly, I would thank everybody for their consideration and ask them to do me the favor of voting for me in this election. Thank you.
Mr. Liston, 2 minutes to close.
Thank you. And I also would like to thank Sauk Valley Media for the opportunity to address people here tonight. Ms. Joyce mentioned being vested in the community. While I wasn't born here or raised here, I moved here in 1988, and I have raised 3 children, 2 graduates of Newman, one who's currently a senior at Sterling High School, which has afforded me the opportunity to really focus on some of the issues facing young people in Whiteside County. The community has been something that I've been active in also, church, coaching for the Sterling Park District. I would also encourage people to talk to people who know us about qualifications. Unlike a lot of elected positions, state's attorney really isn't something that is a real political office and requires somebody who has the legal experience to do the job right. And I think the best information you can get about who has the right experience and who can do the job is to talk to individuals who are involved with the system. I've been practicing law for over 20 years. The last 5 of which I've spent trying felony cases here in Whiteside County. I have the jury trial experience that I think is necessary for the state's attorney's office. And as I mentioned before, I have the appellate background that I believe is absolutely vital to be able to research issues and give proper advice to the county and the county officials when you're dealing with an area of law that's not clear and you need to analyze where you think the appellate court is going to go. Again, as I said, I've handled a dozen appeals that have resulted in at least 7 published opinions. The appellate court only publishes opinions when it's an issue that's novel or one of significance.
Thank you. That concludes our debate between the candidates for Whiteside County State's Attorney. Democrat Trish Joyce, Republican Pat Liston. We thank them for their time tonight. Thanks to our viewers and listeners, and we urge them to make sure they vote by November 6th. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.